one of the top things going on right now that is making waves in college basketball is Duke's hiring of Rachel Baker as general manager. Adam, you wrote about this move yesterday. It's generating a ton of buzz. Jon Scheyer is getting a lot of love across the industry for this hire. And before we get into it, let me just read real quick a little bit of Duke's description about what her role is going to be, because I think when you hear the term general manager in sports, there's a certain connotation that you apply to that based off the professional side of things. But in Duke's case, the general manager, Rachel Baker, is going to specialize in helping players enhance their personal and professional skill sets, capitalize on strategic partnerships, including NIL opportunities, and work to support players in navigating the opportunities and challenges that come with being a student athlete at the highest level. So that's the job description for Rachel Baker. She comes to Duke after 8 years with Nike, where she was big time on the grassroots circuit with the EYBL, and a year of experience in the NBA as well. Adam, you wrote about this hire. Why is it so significant that Duke has hired Rachel Baker as general manager?
Well, because, behind, I don't want to say behind closed doors, but to the people who really know grassroots basketball, Rachel has been one of the most influential people in that world for the better part of the last decade. And I have said for years that she's one of the most influential people that the average college basketball fan has never heard of. Whether it is her connections in previous role at Nike, her connections to various players or grassroots organizations, and more than that, just her individual skill set. Before I came to 24/7 and CBS, I actually had her on my podcast about 16 months ago now. And she was really a trailblazer. I mean, she started as a 22-year-old young woman in what was an unprecedented role in boys grassroots basketball. And she thrived in all aspects of the job. And so, I think that this is important for two reasons. Everybody's talking about the general manager position and all that. And that is important. It is a sign of things to come. I would argue that we already have some of that in the industry, and maybe the general manager position in and of itself isn't quite as unprecedented as some might suggest, at least relative to the job description. But I would argue that Rachel's impact on the Duke program will far eclipse any job description that they have publicized.
Yeah, so when I hear the term GM, I think of, in the professional sense, a guy in a suit, probably an ex-player or some total analytics dork, generally over the age of 50, who has a corner office at the team facility and is crunching numbers and trying to hammer out contract negotiations with agents, with players, on the phone with other GMs across the league, and, probably consulting a coach about, hey, how would you feel about a certain player in your rotation? We're kind of looking at him before the deadline, whatever. That's not what this is. So what exactly is this role? You seem to think she can take it, run with it, make it whatever she wants. But when I hear that job description that I read earlier, the term NIL coordinator seems more apt.
Yeah, I'm sure all that will be part of it. Everything within that job description, I'm sure NIL will be part of it. But you don't hire a person like Rachel and then who is so multi-talented and then have her stay in one lane. That would be a really poor use of her talent. And I think someone like Jon Scheyer, given the relationship Duke has had with Nike over the years, is fully aware of what he's getting in Rachel Baker and isn't going to limit her. Similarly, I don't think Rachel would have been interested in the opportunity if she was going to be limited to just NIL manager. I mean, I think that's the thing that most people don't recognize, is just because people haven't, the average fan haven't heard this name before, doesn't mean that she is not hugely influential and will continue to be. So again, I just don't think you bring a person like that into your program and then say, okay, this is your lane right here. Don't deviate from that. I think when you bring a star in, you let them be a star.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see kind of how that role is going to evolve. It'll be interesting to see as well how many other programs follow suit and in what ways they tailor the new frontier that we're in. It brings up opportunities for positions that haven't existed before. And, it's not as though Duke is the first to ever wade into these waters. I mean, a couple that come to mind recently, Penn State under Micah Shrewsbury hired Brian Snow as director of recruiting in a role that felt fairly unique 18 months ago, at that time in the sport. And then, you got another one that I'm aware of from having written about Arkansas's unique player acquisition strategy. Michael Musselman, the son of Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman, I think is the director of operations, but is very influential in identifying talent and in the recruiting world as well. How much more common is that becoming now in terms of like head coaches delegating some of the talent identification and recruiting to guys that aren't even bench assistants in many cases?
Well, there's a couple of variables at play there, and the first is the NCAA rules. So, how common is it that people in the quote unquote support staff, and that means guys, I shouldn't say guys, that means people who are not in assistant coaching positions, are involved in recruiting? It's very common, but it is not technically, by the letter of the law in terms of NCAA rules over the course of the years. But it's also the equivalent to doing about 67 on the highway in a 65 zone, like nobody cares. So it's, I think it's very common. I think it's very smart. And the GM title is people are really, emphasizing right now. And again, I don't think that this is totally unprecedented. What's unprecedented is getting someone of Rachel's, ability and status to take this type of non-coaching position. That's what's unprecedented. The ability to use your support staff positions and to give them various titles and to have them help in recruiting and have them help in the business of basketball and to have them help in NIL and to have them help grow your program in various ways, that is not at all unprecedented. In fact, most high major programs have vast support staffs. And different coaches some do a better job than others in terms of utilizing those staffs and being creative with it. And certainly Duke is now at the forefront with what they're going to do, but also, again, with who the person is.
All right, so let's wade into some hypotheticals here. As somebody who also covers the college football side, I've noticed a lot of chatter recently about this idea that perhaps actual coaching ability on court or on the field in this NIL era is about to really increase in importance as player acquisitions becomes a money game. All right. So like if you're a star prospect now, you're almost certainly going to pick your collegiate institution in many cases based on the amount of money you can make, which perhaps lessens the significance of the head coach's ability to connect and be cool with the prospect. Maybe if you're a prospect now, you might have been 10 years ago, you might have been influenced by like the shoe game of the coach who was recruiting you. And like, can you jive with a guy and like off the court and all this stuff? Well, like, are we moving towards an era now where the money is going to be the primary influence on where a player goes? And you know what? Like, could Bob McKillop now be a stud high major head coach because he doesn't have to be the cool guy texting the recruits all the time, but the dude can coach on the court like a madman? I mean, are we moving in that direction, or am I kind of like, do you get where I'm saying? Cool? I'm just saying, like, probably not the guy who's like DMing TikTok videos.
You gotta hang out with Coach McKillop more, man. I mean, no, it's no, I think in all fairness, I don't think that we know what this landscape looks like yet. Right now, a lot of these NIL deals are school specific. That is, according to what we're seeing, not the intent of NIL. So the degree to which the NCAA begins to, and I say begins to because I don't think they have at all yet, the degree to which the NCAA begins to police this is going to have a significant impact on what you're saying, which is like, does this just become the highest bidder? And if it does, that's something that I think your point is a good one, in that maybe it just becomes, who has the most resources to offer. But right now there's a very significant business development aspect to this. And that's because a lot of this NIL money is school specific. The rules say that you can't, connect a recruit with those NIL opportunities. But the reality is, anybody who wants to be competitive in college basketball right now needs to be on progressive when it comes to NIL and soliciting NIL opportunities for your school, because without that, you can't compete at a high level in recruiting now. So the way in which the rule is being explained is not indicative of the way in which it is playing out in practicality. In practical terms, and we saw this at Miami very visibly, there are NIL dollars are connected to specific schools. And the business development that goes into creating those opportunities is a large part of the way in which recruiting works at the highest levels right at the moment. That right now is a significant piece of the puzzle. But if the NCAA gets involved and it changes, then I think the landscape itself will going to change. So to your point, is the player development part the primary consideration? Not yet. Right now, the consideration is the NIL dollars, and that has a lot to do with business development.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if you're a college basketball head coach who is disgruntled in this era, in which the portal has extended your calendar, in which you're having to fight for your roster at all times, almost 365 days a year, it seems, and you're making say $3 million in some cases, would you not just go to your AD and be like, hey, look, I want to pay somebody $1 million a year to take it out of my salary, boss? Like, I don't care.
Nobody's saying that.
Well, but the idea that you get somebody to manage your roster for you in consultation with you, it's just such a far-fetched idea in college basketball and college sports in general, where the coaches are total control freaks. They want to have their thumbprint on every aspect of the program. It almost seems to me like you could get, much like in the pros, a GM in there who can look 3-4 years down the road and take some of that roster management burden off of you. And also maybe, hey, be the guy who coordinates with the collective instead of you having to dirty your hands by operating in that space.
What if we called it salary cap manager? I think that is a better, nobody's going to call it that, but that is a better description. And to be clear, we're not talking about any one school. We're not talking about Duke in particular right now, just in general. I think, because if you don't think this is happening in every high major school in the country, specifically in certain leagues where NIL is a much bigger factor, then it just is. So finding access to those NIL opportunities is something that every staff is working on right now. And those that aren't are being left behind. There's a definite regional component to this. The West Coast, the Northeast, they haven't been as ahead in NIL as other parts of the country. Certainly the SEC has been at the forefront of it. But those schools, they are working on this day and night, because this is recruiting right now. And until the NCAA comes out and lays out a framework for how this is not only supposed to work, but how it's going to be enforced, this is how it's going to continue to work. And so general manager, director of recruiting, whatever, every staff that is working in NIL is, whether it's a point person or whether it's a collective effort, is managing those professional relationships and trying to get a sense of what kind of resources they have to allocate and to offer, even indirectly, to potential recruits. That's just the lay of the land right now.